Shalom, shalom, to those close, to those far. We get together again, we come together to speak words of Torah. And words of Torah, even if they have nothing to do with reality, as I was struggling to say last time, even if they have nothing to do with the concrete nature of what is happening here, have an amazing way of stretching out antennae and affecting our real condition. There's a kind of paradox in the words of Torah. And so I want now to go to the great parsha of Lech Lecha. This is the beginning, right? This is the great new beginning in which we deal with Avraham, who is regarded as the father not only of our nation, but of Hamon Goyim. On some level, he is the father of many nations. He's what humanity, in a sense, has in common. Sometimes it's hard to detect that, but nevertheless, that's who he's meant to be. And so I ask to start with, it's hard to know where to dive in here. I ask, so where did he come from? If he wasn't only a father, he was also a son and a grandson, and he has a history. And the history comes with him at the end of last week's parsha. God doesn't speak to him in Ur Kasdim and tell him to go to Israel, to go to Eretz Yisrael, Lech Lecha. He speaks to him only after he's already started the journey with his father and with his family around him. So clearly he starts off as one of a group. And then for some reason, the father decides to stay over in a place called Haran and not to go all the way to Eretz Canaan. And it's only after that that our parsha begins, where God suddenly speaks to this one man in this family, becomes situated in a family with a wife who is barren, certain important facts about him and his origins and where he is destined to go, like nowhere, in terms of having children. Everyone else is having children and he can't, his wife can't. So he's in a kind of blocked situation. And he is the one that God addresses and says to him in the famous words, they're so resonant, Lech lecha me'artzecha, me'moledetecha, u'me'beit avicha, Lech lecha, really just those two words. Get going. Now, Lech is to go, and Lech lecha, as it's read by non-midrashic scholars, what's the force of the word lecha? Go to yourself? That can't mean that. It's an idiom of some kind. It means really when you add the word lecha, shlach lecha, it just means do it with a certain energy. Get going. Here's a project for you. Start traveling. And that simple command to travel is then spelled out very clearly that traveling means traveling away from that whole envelope in which he has been embedded up to now, the family, except for his wife, of course. His wife is himself. His childless wife, his wife who can't have children, ein la valad. She doesn't have the capacity leholid, to do that essential survival thing that you need to do, which is to produce children. And what everyone else is doing very, very enthusiastically, that's called the generations, the 10 generations. And so God tells him, Lech Lecha. And what follows after that is to leave everything behind him. And then God blesses him. And there are several verses given to God's blessings of him. I'll make you into a great nation right away, and I'll bless you, and I'll make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And those who bless you shall be blessed, and those who curse you shall be cursed. And that's it, right? That's 3 verses. In other words, this opening speech contains in it a great deal. And yet what we remember, I think, following a certain true instinct, what we remember of it mostly is Lech Lecha. Just the words Lech Lecha. If one hasn't had a brilliant Torah education, that maybe all one knows about what God said, what was that mission that he said to Abraham, Lech Lecha. And this has been picked up by modern scholars and rabbis and teachers as the great signal to Abraham. And sometimes we might think, well, this is a modernist simplification. Why seize just on these two words? I think it's a true instinct. The true instinct is to notice that there's something about these words which are the whole command. It's a revelation. This is a form of revelation that God is giving to Abraham. And he says to him, Lech Lecha. Everything else, elaborates on it. But the basic thing is those two words. And the strange dynamic of Lecha in its effect on Lech. In a sense, if you don't have vowels, you don't add vowels, it's the same word. Lech, Lech. So what's the effect of that Lecha? And the Midrash has a great deal to say about that word Lecha. Before we get to the Midrash, I want to think for a moment about the question. What were his origins? Go back to that. And I want to say that where he came from, in an important sense, he comes from the world of the Tower of Babel. The world that we read in the previous chapter of how the whole of humanity were one language and common words, common things. In Am Echad v'Safa Achat. The whole world was one nation and spoke one language. And God says, when he is about to break that up, right, when he is going to destroy the tower and scatter everyone over the face of the earth, he says, Hen Am Echad v'Safa Echad. They are one. They are one ideology, one religion, one language. Sounds terrific, no? Isn't that our ideal? V'lo yivatzer mehen. And the result is something that God regards as sinister. That is not a good thing. Everyone is saying the same thing. Everyone is doing the same thing, believing the same thing. That can't be good. It's a certain kind of spurious accord that everyone has. But really what you have is a version of a totalitarian state where language is very important, where everyone understands exactly the meaning of the words. There's no word that's mysterious. There's no word that's unrevealed. Every word is understood and everyone knows exactly what everything means. Again, is that an ideal state? The Sforno says, absolutely not. And he is, of the commentaries, he is the one who goes furthest with this in a way that I enjoy. He says, what's the problem with a situation like this? If everyone thinks the same thing and says the same thing in the same impoverished language, right? In the language of the conscious, and nothing is unconscious, nothing is hidden, nothing is mysterious, then where is the room for any individual, any echad? He uses the word echad, not even Adam echad. Where is any echad who should seek God? Right? His actual words are, "V'lo yifne echad mehem ledat et habore." So then there won't be one single person there in the world who will turn aside from the consensus, who will think his own thoughts to seek a God, to seek the one true God. In other words, what we are looking for is not a situation in which everyone is mouthing the same words. We need a situation in which people have private languages, in which each one means something different by what he speaks. And that, of course, the bad news about that is that it can lead to chaos and destruction. In a way, it's back to the world before the flood. The flood came as a kind of physical representation of the chaos of the world. And so, as against that chaos, sexual chaos, every kind of chaos, no one respects any boundaries at all. You had a little ark, which was all one. And Noah was quite reluctant to leave it, we saw. He really quite liked that situation. Everything's under control. And then Abraham comes from that place. And the Sforno says, in the story of the Tower of Babel, we have the moment of haflagah. It's called dor haflagah. That's not a word that occurs in the story, in the biblical story. It's a word that the sages invented. It's their word. When a ship sets sail, for instance, the ship is maflig. That's the word. It's not such a common word. It's used in modern Hebrew. It means to separate yourself from everyone else, to depart, to be an individual. And there'll be no room for individuals in that kind of unison. And so God breaks it up. And then there arises a person who is called, and this is of course Abraham, who is called Echad. Now this is quite exciting. Where is he called Echad? In the book of Chronicles, there is this phrase. God says, "Ki echad kreativ." The passage starts. One moment. Yes. God says, "Look to Abraham your father and to Sarah your mother. Habitu el Abraham avichem." Look back to your origins, Abraham and Sarah. Because I multiplied va'avarechehu va'arbehu, I blessed him, I made him many, but ki echad kreativ, because really he was just one single person. But I multiplied him and I made him into many. What point is being made there? I don't think that. I think I had I had the attribution wrong. It's from the book of Isaiah. Yeshayahu Nun Aleph Bet, not from the book of Chronicles. I followed the wrong lines. It's from Isaiah. Very important. It's a very familiar pasuk to some people. And what you have here then is God saying, for me, he was. Let me say something first. It's often understood as meaning he was just one single, kind of Nebuch. Poor thing, he was only one person, and I made him into many, and I blessed him, and then he was a great nation. He is the paradigm for you, O Israel, who may feel isolated among the nations, who now feel threatened in all kinds of ways. You feel you're just an echad. But you know what I did for him, I can do for you. Just as he was yichidi ba'olam, Rashi's comment on it is, he was alone in the world. He didn't have anyone to hold his hand. He didn't have any support. But look how wonderfully things turned out. So you will be like him. Atem gam yichidim li. You are also, you can't translate it really, alone to me. I think to emphasize the fact of aloneness and to say, well, just merely one, only one, is not quite to do justice to the force of the word echad. The word echad has a positive force to it. It's not just one, only one. It's a singular person. Just as he was singular, and I took that singularity and I opened it out into the world. So you can be optimistic. That's my promise to you. You look to him as a role model. Look to him as a paradigm of what my relation with you will be. Not only that, kreativ. I called him a single one. That's Abraham. In a way, it became Abraham's name in the mind of God. What is to call someone? Vayikra el Moshe, Sefer Vayikra, where God calls to Moshe. And there too, the Midrash comes and says, it's the beginning of the book of Leviticus, there too the Midrash comes and says, he spoke to Moshe alone, no one else. It was a moment of revelation and it was given to Moshe alone. And the Midrash adds that at the end of days, that singular privilege will be given to all the nations of the world. That's our view of Yemot HaMashiach, of Messianic times. But how was it with Moshe? It was God calling Moshe alone. Why? because Moshe is chaviv to God. That's the Midrashic gloss. Because Moshe is in a position of being loved by God. He is precious to God. And when someone is precious to you, you speak to them in this particular voice of calling, invoking them. And many Midrashic sources, I can't go into that in great depth now. I have to take my word for it. Many Midrashic sources there emphasize that there's something about that relationship of Kriya, which has an intimacy about it. It has intimacy. I'm talking to you alone in that sense, that you are the only one I want to talk to at this moment. And in a situation that could be perhaps a threatening situation, alone among the nations, there is a particular intimacy set up between the human being and God, between Moshe and God, between Avraham and God. Avraham is echad, and it's a particular way of speaking to him. Chavivim. Chavivim gehagerim. Precious are the proselytes, the sages will say also. Yeah, it's another example. Why are they precious? Because they are called precious. I call them precious to make clear this intimate relationship with them. Chavivin Yisrael shenikraim banim lamakom. Precious, beloved are Israel, who are called children of God. Chiba yetera, a special preciousness, is nodat lahem, if they really know that they're called children of God. In other words, we're talking here about a very intimate meeting of God, God's voice, and the receptive consciousness of whatever it is, Moshe, Avraham, Gerim, Batya, Moshe is called the son of Batya, where it's very clear, and that is in Divrei Hayamim, that's in the book of Chronicles. Moshe is called the son of Batya, even though it's very clear that Moshe is not the son of Batya. Why? Because Batya named him. She called him by name. She set up a personal, very intimate relationship with this foundling child. And if she called him something that he really is not, then God calls her Batya, the daughter of God, and proclaims a special preciousness in that relationship. And I've taken quite a bit of time to talk about something that I hope it'll earn its passage. And that is that there is something about that word lecha, particularly. It doesn't say here that God called to Avraham. It says Vayomer. But the focus is somehow on his singularity. Lech lecha. Lech lecha. If you look at the sources that you can see in number 2, and we'll look at them rather quickly. Lech lecha. Here's Rashi's translation of that awkward word, lecha. From the Midrash, he assumes that it means more than just a little stylistic trill. Lech lecha, lehanatcha uletovatcha. It will be for your good and for your benefit. That is, going on this journey, which is really not such an easy thing to do in general, to go on journeys. And to go into the unknown, as we will see. Then it will be for your good and for your benefit. What does that mean? When you get to your destination, to Eretz Yisrael, I will make you into a great nation. Here, you will never have children. There, I will make your name, I will give you many children, and moreover, I will make your name great in the world. In other words, you will achieve everything that a human being can want by way of expansion of something that started off as really rather deprived. So it'll be really for your benefit in a very pragmatic way. And I'll make you into a great nation. And here Rashi comments and says, this is going against your doleful expectations. To be told to go on a journey, that's not an easy command. Because what do journeys do? They cause 3 things. They reduce one's fertility. They reduce one's financial standing. and they reduce one's name. That is, one loses one's standing, one's name in the world. If one is traveling, if one's on the road all the time, you lose the stability of your connections with a particular society and the possibility of building on that, on good things coming from that. And here you are now, like, you know, like a leaf in the wind. You're just fluttering around the world. And so God, in order to counteract that rather doleful meaning of lech lecha, gives him blessings in just those areas. I will make you fruitful. I will make you successful in money, and I will make you famous. Okay. Where should you go? You leave everything behind. That's the bad news. Go to the land which I will show you. And here we come to the heart of the matter. The heart of the difficulty of this kind of command, where God says to someone, you, first of all. It's like someone calling your name in public. It doesn't actually say that here. It doesn't say Vayikra, but wherever it does, and we'll see that it does later, often God calls Abraham, Abraham calls in the name of God. Wherever there is that expression of Vayikra, I'm imagining like someone in the street. You know, you are walking around in blissful solitude in the street, or not so blissful solitude, and someone then asks your name. Calls out your name by name. That has, Vayikra has a certain level of meaning to actually name someone. So there you have that sudden little shock, which for me is always a pleasant shock. You know, of suddenly I'm being called upon. Suddenly someone singles me out. Someone regards me as singular. Here, that same work is done by the word lecha, I want to say. The word lecha has a similar effect. And God says to him, what is the positive side of this command? Go to the land which I will show you. In other words, it's like saying, go to country X. Go to the land which I'm not telling you where you're going. So God is here piling on the difficulty of the journey. It's intensifying. Have a look at Rashi. Lo gila lo haaretz miyad. He didn't reveal, God didn't reveal to Abraham immediately what land he was to travel to kedei lechabeva be'einav, in order to make it chaviv, there's that word again, to make it beloved in his eyes, that Abraham should begin to develop a love relationship with the land, a relationship of intimacy. I want to say chaviv has that meaning of intimate love. You know, you talk about children being chavivim, or sweet people are chavivim. You know, it's that kind of easy love in a way. It doesn't have to overcome boundaries. And so here, it's as if this is a natural kind of love. What is this love? The love of the land that comes of not knowing where you're going. Now that does seem difficult. This seems to me to be highly paradoxical. You might think of not telling a person where he's going would make the land seem tantalizing. He might wonder about it. But what has that got to do with chaviv? And it seems as if, the only thing I can think is that if you're just told the name of the land you're going and you've never been there, well, then all right, you have a certain kind of knowledge, expectation of where you're going. But that's in the realm of technical knowledge, of looking at the railway station, like they have in Eastern Europe, the names are the places where the trains go to. And so you know where you're going. Teasing someone about where he's going, God holding back on where he's going, has a kind of loving teasing about it. It could be rather anxious making as well. I'd really like to know, just in the way that the people of the Tower of Babel wanted to know, what does he mean when he says what he says? I want one safa achat. I want to know exactly where I'm going. I want to know exactly what you mean when I read the technical instructions on a washing machine or whatever. I really hope to have the language as safa achat. as a language that everyone understands. But for many other purposes, that for chavivut, maybe that's not the best way to develop that kind of love, where the language is used in a kind of bare way, in a superficial way. Depths are being called on in Abraham. And so he's given a reward for every tantalizing word that's used in this speech. Every word that says everything but what he needs to know. What he needs to know is the name of the land. Let me know where I'm going. And there's certain kind of, that's what we're talking about here. Not on your page, is the final blessing of God to Abraham, where God says to him at the end of those 3 verses, V'heyeh bracha, and be a blessing. Become a blessing. Sorry, at the end of Pasuk Bet. Escha legoy gadol, yeah, v'heyeh bracha, and become a blessing. What is it to become a blessing? And here Rashi says, and I couldn't resist adding it now, habrachot netulnot b'yadcha. The blessings which were in my hand, says God, up to now, who blessed? It was God, have now been given over to you. As part of this journey, you are going to become a subject. The emphasis on lecha, va'avarechecha, va'gadlash et shemecha. Every verb has the address to you. What is the purpose of that? To transform you, the object, into that God showers blessings on, or to you, the subject, that can bless others. What makes that transformation possible? Right? A person can live many years in the world without being a blessing to others. Sorry, that's a more jaundiced expression than I perhaps really wanted to come out with at this point. You know, one knows people like that. You know, one may even quite like them. But you know, they really don't set their minds on becoming a blessing to others. That's not it. Yeah. And here, this is Abraham's, that's really where he's going. That's what he's traveling for. V'heyeh bracha. The Sforno will actually say, how do you read that? Be a blessing to me, says God. Be a source of blessing to me, which is really overwhelmingly paradoxical. God is the source of blessings and always has been, but now their relationship is going to become strangely reciprocal. That I will be for you and you will be for me. What does that mean? That's not safa achat. That's not just read as you run. This has depths. This has depths that are not immediately accessible. Accessible, yes. So that's where we start. What's the purpose of the journey then? Not so clear. Asher Areka. Have a look at Ramban. I will show you. Ramban takes a rather pragmatic approach to this. You'll see it in number 3. Ela Aris Asher Areka. And when you get there, then you will stay there. And what you have here, Ramban says, is that when you read after this, that they left their point of origin to travel to the land of Canaan. That wasn't his idea of the destination. That was just as a passing point, because he didn't yet know to which land he had been commanded to travel. So Eretz Canaan is clearly not in his mind as his destination, Ramban wants to say. And then he adds, because of this, the fact that he was actually traveling through many countries and through many kingdoms without any sense of knowing where he's going. He was traveling wild. I think there's a passage missed out here. And he sums that up later, his whole traveling experience, in chapter 20, when he talks to Avimelech, the king of the Philistines, and he remembers that traveling period of his life, and he says, it was at that time God made me wander around, wander aimlessly from the house of my father. And that very poignantly is an expression which Avram himself uses autobiographically, as in his memoir of that period. He says, you know what I was doing? I was just like a leaf in the wind. I didn't know where I was going when I got up in the morning. I would get up in the morning, I didn't know where I was going. So it's the needle of the compass was just swinging wild all those years. And God did this to me. Ki haya to'eh k'se oved, Ramban adds, because he was wandering like a lost lamb. Now that puts a poignant emphasis on this traveling period. God said, ultimately, it'll make your destination chaviv to you. But what does it take to get to that place where suddenly an inner pathways have been engraved in you that connect you with the place you're going? And it turns out that those inner pathways are sometimes pathways of trauma. They're pathways of anxiety that end up making life even more precious. One's destination even more precious. Now that adds a kind of paradoxical quality to this. And Ramban wants to say, and he's bringing into play it's a poetic game he's playing here when he says he was wandering like a lost lamb, to'eh, based on the word that Avram himself uses, but presumably used without such a loaded meaning. What Ramban is doing here is importing an association from the book of Psalms, where right at the end of the book of Psalms, I think 150, where the psalmist says to God, Ta'iti k'se oved, I've been wandering like a lost lamb. Please find your servant. Please find me. And that is a poignant cry of lostness that the psalmist cries out to God. And the Ramban here imports, you're supposed to recognize it without inverted commas around it. Ki huaya to'eh k'se oved. It's a hidden allusion. If you look up in a scholarly edition, then you find the source. But we are supposed to understand that the Ramban is adding a layer here of anxiety, of what it means to travel to the land which I will show you, and I'm not showing you yet. Logi lalo, in a world of non-revelation. So here is a complex revelation to Abraham. You have to admit, when God says to Abraham, Lech lecha, that is a revelation of a certain kind. But in the end, it's to the land which I'm not telling you. Immediately, there'll be no knowledge. You're going to travel knowing that you don't know, knowing that a certain bewilderment, knowing a certain anxiety. And this is, in a way, a necessary process. We couldn't have our history without it, because this is what establishes Abraham as echad, as truly echad, with the difficult as well as the privileged associations of that. A certain intimacy with God, a certain singularity, not echad in the sense of part of a larger whole, echad really in the sense of difference, otherness, that Abraham is other, echad, singular. That's the word I like best. Yachid, right? In its positive resonance as well. And so that's a necessary process that Abraham has to go through. It's not just to get to Eretz Yisrael. There's no just about it, of course. That's a tremendous destination. But it's the traveling itself. Lech lecha. Herbert Fingeret, who's a contemporary scholar, psychologist, theologian, in his book, I haven't got the name of his book, sorry, but Herbert Fingeret, at any rate, has a point to make that is related to this. He talks about how what has to happen somewhere is a process in one's development, in which one's all too protected ego, ferocious ego, in some way undergoes an experience of disintegration. Right? It breaks up. What is the ego, he says? It's not just my egoistic impulses. It's something that I value in myself. I couldn't live in the world without an ego, without a self. That self, he wants to say, is what looks for meaning, looks to understand, looks to bring things together in such a way that now I've got a coherent language to speak and I know exactly what things mean. There are processes in life that disintegrate the ego, that break up that sense and make one feel perplexed and bewildered and anxious. Anxiety is the word he uses. That is a kind of crucial hurdle that one has to go through in order to why would one go through this kind of thing? Well, perhaps it's because one's in therapy and one wants to become in some sense a new self. There's something about how I am that's not chaviv to me, that I'm troubled by. Something has to change. And anxiety is the price we pay for not knowing where we're going. In therapy, let's say in therapy. No one comes to therapy and after the first session walks out with a nice instruction booklet saying, right, now your goal is this, and these are the steps we're going to take. Well, not in the kind of therapy I'm talking about anyway, not in dynamic therapy. Because we're talking about dynamism. We're talking about movement, inner movement. Avram is to be transformed. That's the purpose here. And it's going to involve anxiety. When God says, I will make you into a great nation, the Midrash hears that word, la'asot, the simple word to make, hears it as, otcha ani boreh, bria chadasha. To make is to make someone over. Right? To make is to create someone anew, to recreate someone, to, in a way, deform the all too solid object there was before in order to form an imaginative image of the future. And that's what great artists do, says Gaston Bachelard, the French philosopher, aesthetician. What do artists do? They don't form images. Basically, they deform popular, conventional images. They take something that everyone understands and everyone accepts without thinking, and they work with it to pull it apart. They work in clay, as it were. It's like getting your hands into that mass of that molding. And you take something, you may take something that's already been shaped, and you say, oh, no, that's not it. And you start reforming it, you start working it, working the clay. Now that, it means, in a sense, right, that la'asot is a process of going into the unknown, yes? One doesn't really know where one's going. One hasn't decided before one starts, so one doesn't have such a clear vision of exactly what I want. All I know is what I'm feeling in my hands. I'm dealing with material. I think it's a very interesting idea. I'm dealing with material. Where will the material take me? And the material begins to tell you where it wants to go. God works with Avram here. And Avram has to begin to work with himself. He has to begin to regard himself as a proto-subject, as someone who may possibly become a source of blessing. Now, he may not know that that's his target. God says it to him, but he doesn't know what that means yet. And so there's a sense of different languages, of otherness, and not knowing where one's going. And God singles him out and saying, you're the one that I want to do this with. I want to go through this process with you. And that will make you a father. That will make you able to generate others. You will become a subject. You will transmit to others who will not be the same as you, exactly. They will also be other to you, like your children, for instance. And that will not be an impossible hurdle. That will be a hurdle in some way you have been trained to you have been trained to work with. Yes. Now let's have a look at our central midrash. I think it's time to do that. What came to my mind now, and I'm yielding to, is the temptation to share an anecdote, which is it's a podcast I heard with Michael Silverblatt, who is an extraordinary book lover and book making everyone else love books, and quite an extraordinary person. And he said, there's one comment, one little thing that I liked that he said. He said, when we were all children, meaning people of my generation, we used to, at very young ages, we were given books to read that were way beyond us. From Kita Bet to Kita Dalet, he said, we read, and he gave us a whole list of pieces of literature that adults read, that were part of the curriculum. Now what we read is, what the children read is, Jack runs, Jill runs. In other words that the child can fully understand. Now, there's a good side to that. Perhaps the child will get put off. He'll get intimidated if he has to read things that he doesn't understand. But on the other hand, he says, how deprived is a child who's not used to reading things he doesn't understand? Now, just think of it like that. I mean, I really liked the way he said it. And he's not being a sadist here. He's a little bit of an unusual person, shall we say. I don't know if everyone would want him as a father, but there is something true about when I think of my own growth. Growth meant dealing with things that I couldn't understand all the time. I read books that I didn't fully understand, but they did things to me. They brought things out of me. I started guessing. I started, something in me began to develop, to deal with the unknown, Now, that's lechabev. That makes where you're going something you're invested in. You're invested in it, not because it's your destination, but because you enjoy the exploration. You enjoy and hate, are frustrated by. Now let's have a look at the Midrash. Number 4. Vayomar Hashem el Avram. And this is the first of a series of Midrashim, the beginning of Midrash Rabbah, on the words Lech Lecha. Just Lech Lecha. That's all. Lech Lecha me artzecha. All right, Midrash adds the word from your land. Rabbi Yitzchak Patach. No, he opened up here. Shim'i bat. He quotes from the book of Psalms. Shim'i bat Uri. Listen, O daughter, and see, and incline your ear, and forget your people and the house of your father. Now, this is not addressed to Abraham. This is God addressing, let's say, a bride. Yeah, it turns out in the context, daughter. You're someone's daughter. And your job now is to pay attention with your eyes and with your ears, focus attention with your eyes and with your ears, and forget the house of your father. It begins with negation. Forget the house of your father. If you should we read the whole thing together? All right, let's do it the difficult way. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak said, what is this like? Here's a parable. Le'achad, to a singular person, to one person. Shehaya oved over mimakom lemakom, who was moving from place to place to place, right? This is he's a transient. And then he finally saw a castle, bira achat, a singular castle, doleket. So there's a full attention on this castle, which is either illumined, full of light, or alternatively, two different ways of reading it, or on fire. So either it's full of life or it's full of death, because we don't really know what it means. So there we genuinely don't know. There are those who think it means this, and there are those who think it means that, right? Sometimes that happens. The traveler said, would you say that this castle is without anyone in charge? And then the owner of the castle peered out at him, hitzitz alav, peeped, glanced at him, hitzitz, tzutz, this very minimal spark of a word, and said to him, Ani hu balabira. I'm what you're looking for. There is someone in charge. And God introduces himself. The owner of the castle introduces himself just really with the word Ani. Ani, very brief word. To this one little fragmentary being, this echad, who sees a castle and focuses attention on it. And then God focuses attention on him and tells, because Avraham Avinu, now we come back to the analogy, was saying, would you say that this whole world is without anyone in charge? He looks at the world and says, such a world as this, could there be anyone in charge of it? Yes, could anyone be running the show? And it's hard to say those words now. A world such as this. Yeah, I don't want to go there in my mind, but it's in my head many times. But not now. God then glanced at him and said to him, Ani, I'm here. That's a minimal introduction. What you were saying, Ani. There's something really minimal about this encounter, but the anxiety is great if we read it as the castle on fire. If we reread it as the castle alight, then it's more straightforward. God is answering his quest. He's looking for an explanation of who is in charge here. I don't yet know. I haven't been introduced to the owner of the castle. So he's saying, well, you wouldn't say. Tomar means you would say. Would you say? Meaning you can't say that no one's in charge here. So it's kind of turning it around. And he looks out and says, no, yeah, you're right. Here I am. God then peered, I'm the master of the world. And then we go back to the young woman who is supposed to forget her father's house, go back to Tehillim, go towards your husband, to marry your unknown husband. V'yitav hamelech yofyech, and the king will desire your beauty, for he is your master, he is your Lord. And the Midrash translates here from Psalms, what is it the king will desire your beauty? Leyapotech ba'olam. You, the purpose of the journey is to make you beautiful in the world. He will desire your beauty, not just as an object of his desire. What he will desire is that you will have a beautifying effect on the world. Yes, liyapot, that somehow to transform you into a subject of beauty. That you will radiate some kind of beauty, all right? Or you will speak beauty to the world. I don't know exactly. And then you will bow down to him. In the same passage, you'll bow down to your husband, right? In other words, you will be, right, ladies, we don't love this bit, that you will acknowledge him as your Lord, and a traditional bride. A bride throughout the centuries who had to leave everything that she knew, including her father's house, and forget him. There is the anxiety. Forget the deepest bonds that she has. Right? It's tearing herself away from almost the Oedipal connection with her father, if you want to put it like that. to go and marry an unknown husband who she will be completely subservient to, but will have the effect on her of making her beautiful, of creating beauty in her to the world. It's so loaded and so ununderstood that I have to say it's positively exciting. There is something in this that what is the Midrash saying? It's talking about eros, it's talking about love in the sense of desire and beauty, and it's talking about forgetting one's bonds with one's past and entering into an erotic relationship that one can't begin even to conceive of in one's innocence at the moment. Yes, our bride doesn't have any idea, let's say. Yes, traditional brides are really what they're getting into, the transformative nature. And I want you to go lecha with some relation to the destination of yourself. That this will be for you. The Zohar puts it very simply. Lecha means letikuncha uragormacha. To the remaking of you, tikkun, to the perfecting of you, and to the creating of you, ligrom. So we're talking about a moment of splitting off from an original form, breaking up an original form, and molding now, an inner molding that Avram is to do with himself in order to achieve a form that he doesn't really visualize to start with. He doesn't really know. Okay, so if we've reached this point, now let's have a look very quickly at the lecha, the traveling motif here, and the meaning of it according to Ramban and Rambam. Ramban, number 5 on your page. Number 5. I want to really do this very briefly. He says, why is Abraham chosen? What is the reason? Why did God say, Ma ta'am? What's the reason? I would almost say the taste. If this were a, what did it taste like? That relationship between a God who says to Abraham suddenly, out of the blue, leave your country and I'll make everything wonderful for you. It doesn't make sense. The taste is, it's not a good taste. It doesn't work. Why would someone be told, as if that is the mitzvah, just leave, go on a journey, and then everything will be wonderful? What you need, what you're missing is prior information, where you're going and what you're going to get there, and all the pragmatic things are missing. All the purposeful things are missing. So there is no ta'am to this. There's something irrational here. It's ethically irrational as well, because it doesn't say the kind of things that Torah says. If you walk before me and are whole, then I will be good to you. If you do the things that you should be doing in the world, then good will come to you. Here it just sounds senseless. Just start traveling. Is it just pure faith? Notice that the word emunah is not used anywhere in all the sources that I've looked at. It's not just that Avram is being asked to act in blind faith. I just can't believe that that's exactly the right note. But the right note is something else. Abraham here, and the Ramban is emphasizing it. Then both he and the Rambam, and I'm going to cut this very short. Please read the passage for yourself. I cut off the Ramban before it gets to this passage. Basically are very pragmatic, and they say Abraham was having a horrible time in Ur Kasdim, in which he was persecuted by the king because he broke those idols. You remember that midrash, that famous midrash? He broke those idols that his father was commercially involved with. His father was the man to go to for idols, and this little boy smashes the idols, and his father takes him to the king for judgment, and the king condemns him to be thrown into the fire. And that midrash is picked up by both Ramban and the Rambam, and I'm not doing them justice here, but we have to cut corners, to say something broader and more philosophical, historical philosophical. To say that Abraham began to teach new ideas. After having, Rambam particularly, after having lived in this society in which everyone was worshipping idols, he, for some reason, began a process, a long process in his mind from the age of 3 till the age of 45 or 48 or something. Many years of inner cogitation, thinking. Well, the wonderful expression the Rambam uses at the beginning of number 6 is that this giant, Eitan Zeh, when he was weaned, when he was just a little one, Hitchil Shotet Bedato. He began to revolve, to wander in his mind, shotet, to wander. So his wandering was a mental wandering to start with. It was a philosophical, long exercise in trying to arrive at a theory that would make sense of all the muchness of the world, of all the many idols, all the manyness of things. And finally, after many years of thinking, he gets to the idea of the one God. And he smashes the idols. All right, that's just a way of saying something more serious. More serious is philosophical. He begins to teach what he has come to understand. Once he arrives at the truth, he moves on to teaching, and then the government doesn't like what he's teaching, that he is proving to be a dangerous echad, he's a subversive, and he has a hard time one way or the other. The Ramban will actually say that there was a sort of bore, he threw him into a pit or into a fiery furnace. In other words, don't be too particular about it. What it means is that the king meant him no good. And that's when God said to him, look, it's no good for you here. You want to have a good life, a good teaching life. You want to find good students, start traveling. And then he started traveling. That was the next stage of his life. And wherever he traveled, Vayikra, Huhaya Kore, he was calling out in the name of God, which Ramban understands to mean gathering many people around him. Likro is to assemble people, Kriye Ha'edah, bringing all those many, many people. I think in the end, he says thousands and myriads of people followed him on his journey, became a kind of moving population, nomadic population that he calls into being. Right, the word likro b'shem Hashem. He publicly invokes God and brings towards the name of God this single focus. He brings many, many people, and the emphasis there on gathering alafim or revavot, and then he plants this truth, this great truth in their minds, and he also writes books about it. And the Midrash has a particular book in mind here that it's supposed to be the book of Abraham. And of course, the final thing is he informed Yitzchak, his son, of this truth. Now, I haven't got an answer for the question, why does that come right at the end? That he taught his son. Why not before that? But at any rate, that is a history, I want to say a little provocatively, that is the Rambam's history of Socrates. It's an alternative Socrates. Socrates gets killed for being the echad, being the one who tries to break all the conventions. And here is an alternative. Someone, Abraham, who is similarly endangered and whom God says, Lech lecha, go in order to create a world around you, a new world of people. And that's what it means, an alternative society that's based on an idea that Abraham has kept to himself through long wheeling it around in his mind, long permutations in his mind. Really, my reason for bringing the Rambam is to compare it with the Me'er Shiloach, which follows. The Me'er Shiloach is a modern, not to say a postmodern, even though he lived at the end of the 19th century, towards the end, second half of the 19th century. But there are many things about his way of thinking that speak to us very directly, or to me anyway, and many other people that I know, very, very directly. And he takes that word lecha, lech lecha, me'artzecha, and moves away from this conception of someone who is looking for a philosophical truth and comes to it in his own mind without any connection with anything else, solitary, and then begins to spread it out. You notice there's not much reference in the Rambam to God, except that he is the great principle. Ikar Agadol. He is the source of all things. In other words, God is the object of Abraham's explorations. Finally, he gets it. Here we have something very different. Vayomer, number 7. Vayomer Hashem el Avram. God said to Avram, Lech lecha mi'artzecha. Quotation from the book of Isaiah. Ki etzak mayim al sameh. An image. Now we're talking about the creative imagination now. The way the Midrash mobilizes verses that come from quite a different part of Tanakh, the book of Isaiah from the prophets, and imports them into this situation. Lech lecha. What is lech lecha? And at first we don't see the connection. It's like what we read in the book of Isaiah, when I pour water upon the thirsty one and liquids on dry land. It's that kind of dynamic. We're talking about the dynamic of watering dryness, a dynamic of, first of all, a great need, dryness, thirst, someone who's parched, receiving water that has come from the outside, water that has come from beyond, and taking it in gratefully. Yes. It also has about it the idea, the hidden idea, of making clay of earth and water, which was important last week when we spoke about molding. The idea that what you're dealing with now is the creative process itself, where water is put into solid matter and disintegrates it in a way, and then it can begin to reform it. When Avraham Avinu began, right, Mea Sheloach begins with the same expression that the Rambam does, only the Rambam is looking for the great mover of the whole universe. But what Avraham is looking for is Shoresh HaChaim Shelo. He's looking for the root of his own life. He is turned in on himself in some very important way, which God furthers. That is, Abraham is looking for a sense of how he can become a subject and not an object. And so the first movement is, what's the root of my life? There's an organic quest here, the root of the flower, the root of the vegetation. I want to go down to the very basis of everything. And he understands that nothing in this world deserves to be called by the name of life. There is nothing in the world that deserves to be called. I get the idea of naming. He's looking for something that is worth naming, chayim amitiyim, true life. That's the way he puts it, true life. And nothing in this world meets that quest. He says, so what are all the wonders of this world, the desires of this world? They're all things that remove obstacles from us. It's very nice to have food when you're hungry, all right? We need that. We need that, otherwise we spend our whole time trying to earn a living. So it's very good to have the wherewithal, not to spend all our time on necessities, and be able to look for that luxury, as you might call it, which is an absolute necessity for Abraham, which is Shoresh HaChaim Shelo, the root of my own life, of his own life. And so the Mea Sheloach goes on to talk about using expressions like this, Guf HaChaim. What is the actual body of life? Right, a sense of embodiedness, Right? It's a sense of organic development. He's looking for the organic root, like an obscure vegetable process in his own life. And that's when he was in that quest, God then said to him, Lech lecha, go to yourself, le'atzmecha. There's a few lines down. Ki be'emet, really, nothing else can be called life. Where is life? Don't look everywhere else but yourself. Timtza b'cha. The reality, the body of life, the dynamic of life can be found only in yourself. It's a very challenging reading because God doesn't say, look out here at me. What he's saying in this reading is, look into yourself. You'll find everything you need in there. Now, is that kind of pure subjectivity? It's a philosophy of subjectivity? I don't think so. There's something else going on here. Timtza b'cha. And in order to make clear what he means by b'cha, in you, he quotes from Isaiah again. Isaiah is a great source for Lech Lecha. Ve'ata tagil b'Hashem b'kdosh Yisrael titala. And you shall rejoice in God, in the Holy One of Israel shall you be praised. Now, what does he want with that verse? It's the emphasis on ve'ata. You shall rejoice. It's your joy you should be paying attention to. Your joy in God. Your experience of having water enter into your dryness. Don't look at the water. The water is not the thing. It's the interaction between you and what has come into you, right? What it has provoked in you, what it has evoked in you. That's what you should be looking at. Lech lecha. There's no getting away without yourself. Ignoring yourself means that you're going to be tormented by yourself for your whole life because you haven't found the root of yourself. So it's a accept yourself. Perhaps accept yourself, even in the parts of yourself that you don't really like. So how does the Meir Shiloach then go on? He goes on, he brings us back to the owner of the castle, to that midrash. And he has his extraordinary reading. Hitzitz alav balabira. The owner of the castle peered out alav. Really, grammatically, the way the words are usually used, it should say hitzitz elav. He gazed at him. He looked at him as if to say, yes, I hear what you're saying, and this is what I have to say to you. Hitzitz elav. But it says alav. He focused on him. It's kind of scrutiny that the owner of the castle is focusing narrowly on him in the particular condition that he is in. And what is the condition that he is in? The way the Meir Shiloach puts it is that he is in the same condition, in the condition of someone who's gone through that story of the Tower of Babel, of that generation, of a generation in which it's impossible to find God. No one is interested in finding God because they're all talking the same language. They're all talking a surface language, the service of washing machine instructions, and which in a way cancels out the possibility of anything I don't yet understand. Anything, any kind of language that opens up depths. And that Dor Haflaga, right, that was the generation that Avraham had to deal with. And it's that Avraham now experiences in the Midrash, in the imagery of the Midrash, as a castle on fire. It's a castle on fire. You may even say, you can even say, as well as being a castle on fire, it's also a very civilized, the alternative reading. It's a civilized, well-lit castle in which everything seems to be in place. Right? Everything is, there's a lot of seder there. An ordered situation. And here is Avraham as the only person who feels disordered. It's a wonderfully provocative reading. And God says to him, look at you. Tir'eh ba'atzmacha. Don't look at anything else. Look at you. I can't help hearing how a fond parent will sometimes talk to a child. Look at you, at the amazing, unexpected, quirky thing the child is doing. Look at yourself. You're the only one who is troubled. And very strong words for confusion and trouble and disorientation are used then. Taromet, hirim libcha. You are in a stormy state. Only you. Everyone else thinks the world is beseder. Everything, it's just fine. And you're the only one who's in trouble. In that sense, asking Yishai Mevorach, who is someone whose shiurim I like to listen to, put it very beautifully. He said something like this. I can't not quote it in his name because I think it's so good. He said, "Why am I the way I am?" That sort of thought that young people have, that creative people have, people who are not coherent with the world. They look at the world that looks to be, people feel fine in it. And I look and I see incoherence. I see something that doesn't make any sense. What's wrong with me? And God says to him, look at you. Ani balabira. Which the Me'er Shiloach understands as, I'm the one who has put this dis-ease into your heart. This turbulence comes from me. Zemitzidi. His student, the Me'er Shiloach's student, Rabbi Tzadok Cohen, and I don't have time to go into this as much as I would like, in Tzidkat HaTzadik, Reish Mem Zayin, if you want to look it up, takes that a crucial step further and says Abraham is at that level, that stage of revelation. It's a kind of the first stage of revelation of I, Darga de Ani, where the source of God is registered, the source of one's life, which is God, is registered in oneself. And God here says to him, you have nothing more to do than just look into yourself, look at yourself, and realize that in a way, that in you which is in turmoil is Ani. Do you understand? Ani balabira. I am in you, or you are in me. Right? It's that form of belief that's called panentheism, where I don't say that God is part of me. I say that the most precious part of me is God. My lev, the Shekhinah is in you. Rabbi Tzadok reads it. And that upset that you're going through, lech lecha, go right into it. Accept it. Because only when you accept it will you take responsibility for it and act on it and try litaken. Try to make it. You will have a certain sense of responsibility. And that's what it means when God calls to someone, as God later will. It's that lech lecha. Making it so that the postmodern expression for this is interpellation, which really means calling across a barrier, an otherness, and making you, in your otherness, in your feeling of being at odds with the world, realize that that's part of the story, that your otherness shouldn't be rejected by you. It should be really looked at hard by you. And then you do what you have to do, what you can do, to teach, to illumine, to become a source, a source of light. But you can't get away without that intermediary stage of anxiety and of bewilderment and perplexity and so on. Now, this is our postmodern Me'er Shiloach, Rabbi Tzadok. Where do they get it from? Is this purely a modern evolution of a more traditional idea, like the Rambam and the Ramban? And so in the passages that we have left on the page, number 8, for instance, which we'll read now, number 8, number Tet Bet, that is the second passage on Lech Lecha. we can find the ancient midrashic roots of this kind of thinking, of what we call postmodern thinking, the organic way of thinking, of looking into yourself, that Avram is being told to focus on himself as the revelation of God. There may be later stages of evolution. Har Sinai may be a later stage, but this is Avraham. This is his greatness. Vayomer Hashem el Avram, number 8. Rabbi Brachya said, L'reach shmanecha tovim shemen turak shemecha. From Shir HaShirim, something about the fragrance of your precious oils, and that your name is like decanted oil. In other words, there's a sense here, very sensual sense, right? This is of you are like precious perfume, precious oils. And that is your name. Your name has an effect on the world, which is like precious oils. Amar Rabbi Brachya. What was Avram Avinu like? Right? We're looking for an image. We're casting around for an image. We don't want to understand yet. We don't want to just say, oh, well, so Avram is like precious oil, as if I understand anything about it. I don't understand that. What do you mean? What makes him like perfume? Strange thing to say. And so we're looking for an image. The image is then of a flask of spices, of perfume, let's say, held in place, mokefet, by some material. Umunachat bazavit, and wedged into a corner. So you have this precious bottle of perfume, very stable, held in a corner, and corked tight. Velo hayare chonodef, and its perfume didn't float out into the world. It had no effect on the world. It was just corked tight in itself. Kevan shehayita metaltelet hayare chonodef. As soon as it was moved around, agitated, put out of joint in some way, right? Disordered. All kinds of translations, if you look up the word metaltel, tiltul, it comes from the root tul, to take something and to move it. It's a basic movement. So the very root of the word has to do with movement. It has to do with dynamics. You can't leave your perfume lying in a corner. Perfume is not perfume if it doesn't do perfume. You know, it's theoretically perfume if it's corked up there in the corner. To make it do perfume, you have to make it move. So first of all, you open it up, and then you agitate it. Then you agitate the word to take, tiltul. You know, so it's a double root there. Yeah. Means to agitate in some way. And here I have a whole list of translations from some reference book. To be unsteady, to be handled, to be distracted, dissipate, deranged, traveled. It's the word for travel, but it's also the word for a kind of madness. Letaltel is to swing, to hurl, to exile. Taltelet is road fatigue, right? None of these things sounds great. They all express disorder. Taltel, as soon as the bottle of perfume was waved around, then its perfume wafted out. So God said to Avram Avinu, Taltel atzmacha mimakom lemakom. Do that to yourself. Lech lecha. It's an incredible jump, isn't it? Lech lecha means make yourself dynamic. Dynamize yourself. Make yourself into the tiny molecules of liquid that were nice little amount of liquid there was there. It weighed something, you know, micronize it. Now that's a real word. I looked it up because I had it in my head and I thought, you know, I need to get educated. So I looked it up, and it's a word that's used in the chemical treatment of substances, of liquids, to diminish the diameter of the particles, right? We're talking about very, very minuscule parts. And we're making it smaller because that makes it more effective to mix with other things, to penetrate other things. There's a world of imagery here. So God says, Tiltul atzmecha, make nothing in a way. Translate that nice little flask of perfume, translate it into an effect on the world. It's just a haze of droplets, of nothings, right? And then you will have achieved something. That's called by making your name great in the world. In other words, what I want of you is not exactly teaching. Go around and be a teacher, like the Ramban says, and like the Rambam says, that he taught theology. He just went around and taught the world things about theology and against idolatry and so on. There's something else going on here. There's something much less major that he's being asked to do, just to agitate himself, just to activate himself, to make himself dynamic, so that something organic begins to come out of him, which is called recho, his reach. He will have an effect on the world through, it's hard to say what, maybe even wordlessly, but let's not go that far. Al kein alamot ahivucha, pasuk in Shir HaShirim, the erotic connection there. Therefore, young girls love you. And the traditional midrashic understanding of that is, this is Avraham, whom everyone fell in love with. Now, this I can't help smiling because it really is so unexpected in a way. Avram is to become, well, you might say a love object in the world, but I don't want to say that. It's not a love object. It's not just a charismatic person who's going to bestow the benefit of his gracious presence on an adoring public. He is going to be the active element that will transform, because he himself is in a process of transformation, because he knows himself about the work. He knows about the work of becoming a subject. And whatever he does to people, he talks to them, whatever he does, he will convey that. And that has to do with beauty. The effect of beauty is not just a kind of automatic effect. It's very subtle. It has to do with the unconscious. It has to do with associations, what I associate with what I'm seeing. It's very personal.
Avivah?
Yes.
He's to be a catalyst, maybe.
He used to be a what?
Catalyst.
A catalyst. Okay, thank you. A catalyst is a pretty good word, except that I kind of like to get away from chemistry. And back to the organic flowers, that mechanism, the flowers that go into perfume, and the idea of something that's almost not there, the idea of tzimtzum, of something micronized. I hear what you're saying. I should mention again that I prefer your comments to be made at the end of the class. But that's fine. And so let's look at the next one. What is that lech lecha? Here's another try. And that's also very near the beginning of the Midrash Rabbah on lech lecha. Lecha, quotation again, lecha tal yaldutecha. To you is the dew of your youth. To you, yours is the dew of your youth. Lefisha haya avinu Avraham. Mitzpached, because our father Avraham, right? So that's applied to Avraham. It has nothing to do with Avraham in its source. Avraham was anxious, mitpached, and saying, Tomar sheyesh biyadi avon. Would you say that? We'll recognize this week and next week that that's Avraham's signature tune. Tomar she. That is, he's wondering constantly, what can you validly say about this? How should I name this? Right? He's casting around, he's traveling in his mind. What is a meaningful way of talking here? Would you say that I hold in my hand, I'm still clutching in my hand, my original sins? avon, that I worshipped idols in my youth. Now, that's quite a leap. That Abraham begins to ask himself, who am I? And is rather horrified, made anxious to realize that, I may be holding on to some of that. How could it be such a complete transformation? And he worries about it, whether it's true or not. That's not the thing. He is anxious. He is anxious. And God addresses his anxieties. And he says to him basically, Lech lecha. Accept those anxieties. Yeah. Lecha tal yaldetecha, because that idol worship of yours, of your youth, if for you, the right image is of dew. It's like dew. Just as this dew evaporates in the world, so your sins evaporate in the world. You see the connection with the perfume. This sense of something that's almost not there. It evaporates, it vaporizes. Just as this dew is a sign of blessing in the world, so you are a sign of blessing in the world. Now, what does that mean? For the few minutes that we still have left. Your sins are like dew. That they're there and then they're not there. Like dew is there, you can actually see it sometimes early in the morning, a little droplet, and then it's not there. The Shem Mishmua, number 11, gives us his reading. And incorporated in his reading is the passage from the Talmud in number 10, which I wrote out separately. What is this analogy of evaporating dew? We have to understand that. That's something we don't understand. It's a dynamic image that leaves me mystified. And then he offers his reading. And he gets it from his father, as it turns out. Quoting another passage in the Talmud. Again, now we're going to deal with the transmissions, the unconscious transmissions between a passage in the Talmud and a passage in Hosea, and that original, the passage that is being Lecha tal yaldetecha, which is from Tehillim, I think. Right, what does it say in the Talmud? Israel said, quoting from Hosea, "Let God come to us like rain." And God answered, I will be like dew to Israel, not like rain. Israel asked for something that is not always a good thing to ask for. Lo tamid mitbakesh. It's not always a good thing to ask for. What is it? Have a look at number 10. There you can see it clearly. They want something that will come like rain to us. It will appear to know God. God will come and reveal himself to us and implant himself in us and transplant himself into us, as it were, and like rain does. And God says, my daughter, he says to Israel affectionately, my daughter, you're asking for something that is sometimes a good idea and sometimes not a good idea. To have a revelation of that total kind, where something comes from outside and penetrates you. But I will be to you something that is always in order, always something that you would want. Shene'emar, also quoting from Isaiah, I will be like dew to Israel. And the Shem Mishmuel, who is a Hasidic commentary on the Torah, also 19th century, explains this. And he explains it in these terms. He says, what does rain do? Rain descends heavily on the earth and moistens the earth and stays there. It stays there as a body of water. It drenches the earth. It's clear that the earth has been penetrated, has been entered into by a foreign body. And God answered that the problem with that is then that your growth will not be because of you. It'll be because I have come and revealed myself to you. And that's not always the way to go. What we want sometimes, very often, is that I should be like dew. What does dew do? Eno rak me'orer et halachot ha'atzmit. It just enlivens, awakens, me'orer, air. It awakens, it agitates the moisture that is part of oneself. The moisture that is in oneself, the potential moisture in oneself, right? It just kind of wakes it up. You know, like you said, what was the word you used? The chemical word?
Catalyst?
Yes, a kind of catalyst. But again, coming back to the organic thing, the idea is somewhere of waking up, which is so important in Hasidic thought. As if one is walking around in a state of tiltul, in a state of anxiety, unfocusedness, otherness to oneself. I'm not my best, being my best self, bewilderedness. That's a large part of how we live. Freud called it, in the end, the unconscious. That there is a seething cauldron in there of otherness, which is lecha. It's you. And something comes and evokes that, doesn't allow one to dwell on the surface, but evokes that and brings out of it an autonomous impulse, an impulse that really comes deep from a root. The root, which is God, Shechina in me, according to the Mea Shiloh, Tzadok. That is, there is a sense that going in deep beyond the ego exposes one to that anxiety of uncertainty and of otherness and why on earth am I the way I am? Kind of basic rejection of oneself in some way, which is also a question. And God answers the question and says, no, but there's an answer to that. You are there in order to activate that. And all that Abraham then does in the world, it's not teaching philosophy or theology in this understanding, although that may be part of it. It's activating lecha, going to that resource and activating some kind of true self. Time is passing. I think we should look at the Sfatim Met, number 12, very quickly. The Sfatim Met, another of the great Hasidic commentaries on the Torah, around the same period, refers to the famous question that the Ramban asked, and which we talked about. It says, Lech Lecha, it doesn't give you the necessary prior information. We needed to hear something before that, Mikodem, which is, his way of putting it is, why does God love Abraham so much? Why does he choose him? Why does he approach him with Lech Lecha? Chibato. And Sfatim Met answers from the Zohar. And he says, that in itself, that lack of information, is the Shevach, is the praise, is the excellence of Abraham. What is the excellence? It's the fact that he's hungry. It's the fact that he's thirsty, that he's disordered, that he's asking almost destructive questions of himself. And God is saying to him here, Lech Lecha, which on the first level means accept what is. Accept the Shekhinah in you, which is that turbulence. And only so can you move it away from a kind of narcissism, a constant preoccupation with yourself, to a sense of the larger presence that you are in, right? That I am in God. The I of me is in God, but God is much more than me, obviously. But one of the most valuable place, as far as I'm concerned, is the God who speaks in me, who comes out of me. And that means depth, and that means very profound work. I'll finish with something a little sad, because it's something I've just been thinking about recently. It's not exactly the most jolly ending, but let me try this. Etty Hilsum. Does the name mean anything? Etty Hilson was this extraordinary Dutch woman, young woman, who threw in her lot with her people. She was first of all imprisoned in the camp in Westerbork, which was the local Dutch camp, and then she chose to go to Auschwitz after that, and who behaved really in the most extraordinarily tzaddiket-like way. And she's left diaries, she's left letters in which I read these many years ago, and I go back to them every now and then, in which one has a sense of what she wanted to be. How does one go about becoming, the Christians call it a saint. Yeah, it's a saint. Well, what image would do for her? What would satisfy us perhaps a little better? And she herself says that what I most want somehow is to be the feeling, thinking heart of the camp. Now, it's not a sensational thing, right? It's that she wants to feel that she's taken into herself, she's gathered into herself all the anxiety and the terror and the trauma of the camp, to which she is exposed all the time. She opens herself to it. She goes exactly where it is. And it's unbearable for her. It's not easy at all. And her idea is that it will come into her and she'll take it into herself and she'll find a way of feeling and thinking it so that it becomes somehow a living organic reality. It's something that then can connect. She can be the connector between the camp and God. That's her dream, if you will. That's her reverie. And in order to achieve it, she deals with reality. And that's I think, why she came to my mind, that she doesn't shut off thoughts of all the tool, of all the horror, but that in some way she tries to transform herself to be larger, to be able to take in all that, and in some way to radiate it outwards. I think I want to finish just there without adding anything. And I'd like to leave a few minutes for you to, if you have questions or thoughts, further insights.
There's something about this shiur that reminded me a lot about Adam in the Garden of Eden. I just came up again and again and again.
Mm-hmm. Can you give an example, or?
For example, let me see. Hashem says to Adam, Ayeka.
Mm-hmm.
And
okay. Good. Yeah. All right, that'll do. Yes. Okay. Ayeka, as it's been taken in the Midrash, right? Very, very clearly. It's not God looking physically for Adam in the garden. Where are you? The question is one of responsibility for the future.
And also his transformation from the original Adam to the one after he ate from the fruit and suddenly became aware of himself.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is a transformation, and it's a beginning of a naturalistic Adam. It's the beginning of an Adam who has complexities, who is not just hardwired to do all the right things.
Yeah.
This is someone who has an unconscious, if you want to put it like that. And I think we've been playing all along with the idea of the unconscious. In Avram, the unconscious becomes a dynamic reality in the world. That Avram has those roots to his being, which are not on the surface. And the idea of activating them, of finding a way of activating them so that the world can be remade. The world can't be remade unless I am remade. It really comes back to that. And
that's also a similarity with Adam.
Yes, but Adam, we don't really see such good effects of all that. Adam, it remains as a kind of distant species objective. It's something, I don't think Adam as an individual achieves that. But humanity, Adam as humanity, Avram is an extremely important stage in that. In a way, he is the stage which is most focused on precisely that. Moshe is not exactly that. Moshe is something else, maybe something even more. But Avram has the thing itself. He stands for that. Heye bracha. Heye bracha is that process of inner transformation, which involves kind of deep, obscure work of some kind, and a dynamic with the self, with becoming someone who is responsible and owes the world a response, who can't rest. Anyone else? I see I'm looking very dark.
I'd like to share something.
Yeah.
And what you just said about Eddie Hillison,
Yes.
brought this to mind.
Yes, Beth.
I was so touched when I saw on the TV news that Yocheved Lipschitz turned and shook hands with one of the Hamas as she was being freed.
Yeah.
And that she has recounted so honestly both the brutality and the kindness that she experienced while she was captive by them. And I admire that so much, that she was not so tainted by her experience and what has happened to Israel in general, that she couldn't maintain her honesty and appreciation for when human kindness did come her way.
Thank you for saying that. It may arouse different feelings in different people. The Israeli government was not happy that this was put on the air, because that's not what you need at this moment. That's at least what the Israeli government felt. At this moment, we don't want divided feelings. We are making war, and so on and so on. And I'm not mocking that by any means, but it is what we will need in the time after. And hopefully, Be'ezrat Hashem, we will reach a stage in which we can afford to do this kind of work, in which it will become, perhaps you could even say, essential work. And the work of reverie, call it, it's kind of dream work, not the work of, And this woman is very, very brave and very honest, and she's saying something that's doesn't belong to its time. And I hope it'll be remembered when it's needed, when we'll all need to work with ourselves. Is that it?
Can I say
Sarah,
something? Yeah.
sure.
So two thoughts passed through my head when you were talking about the Hayei Bracha, being that's the destination of the journey. And it just was like struck me, that's the destination of the journey of your life. Asher Eka is basically, yes, now we know it's Eretz Yisrael geographically, but really everybody has a different journey and a different place and a different geography, but that's why it's like more vague, because it's forever.
Yeah.
And no matter what you go through, really the goal is to be a blessing. I don't know if it's positive psychology, but just come through it, make the best choices.
Yes.
And
I agree with you. Go on. Sorry, I'm interrupting.
And if you wake up with that dew, touching your own dew and bringing out your potential, it's like perfume. You will just inspire, and you'll be there for people. Okay. Like people will fall in love with you, like with Abraham.
Okay, I hear that, and it really, it suits you to say that. I know that's how you live, but from where I stand, one doesn't want to be too intentional about it.
Mhm.
Doesn't want to be too conscious. I'm going to do, this good deed and that good deed and that good deed. It's very important to have that conscious, purposeful attitude. But that's not the depths of the story. The depth of it is that there is something that comes from deep within oneself, that in a way one doesn't intend. One doesn't go around intentionally doing good, but just doing the work in oneself that will be effective in the world, clearing the screen, clearing and that reverie kind of work is very serious work, even though it sounds like play work.
Right, but it works on every level.
On every
On that deep reverie level, not everyone gets there.
Yeah.
But the people who can't get there or don't get there, they can still do the little deeds and the little work and still play a part.
Right.
And maybe they play a big part, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's those people who aren't so deep in reverie like that do a lot of the practical stuff that people think.
You're absolutely right. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Aviva,
Yes.
I
Ruth.
would say
Sorry, have I got the right person? Who am I?
Sharon.
Sharon, just a moment.
Sharon. Yes,
Sharon.
I maybe this will make you blush, but I think you are a paradigmatic example of someone who just does what she does, and we receive it as a blessing. And I mean that from my heart.
Thank you very much. I mean, I take that as a personal, it certainly makes me feel good. There's no question.
Right.
Yes.
But you're being you, and you're actualizing your growth and potential, and that's its effect on us. Thank you,
Sharon.
So
Second the motion.
Thank you. But that's not the way one feels it oneself, but it's good to know that's sometimes working that way. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It's been good to be with you, and Mi'ez Hashem next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.